Firstly, hello everyone. It's a very proud moment for me to be sitting on the other side and trying to help out students and alum from IIM Indore in particular. I would say I have been in the same position when I sort of graduated from IIM, and even in the initial few years of my career where there was a lot of clutter in my mind, right, as to what to try and achieve, where to go, etc. And to be very honest, have made a lot of mistakes in my career, not as rosy as Arnav would have mentioned in the introduction. And I think that really helps me to sort of suggest and guide a lot of you on how to navigate a tricky journey that our career path is, right? Both in the short and in the long term. So that's the intent of the session. And like Arnav mentioned, I work in Deloitte currently. I work as an associate director with the AI and data strategy consulting team. Do have 10 plus years of overall experience. Graduated from IIM Indore myself back in 2015 and have worked in different industries over the last many years: financial services, IT services, e-commerce, CPG, and now into consulting of late. Um, so yeah, and as most consultants would do, I think I'll have a deck of my own and I'll walk you through the deck. Try to help you navigate the journey through structured paths and questions that you could ask to yourself to get the desired clarity in your mind on how to solve different scenarios and situations at different phases of your career. Quickly share my screen. Right. So the agenda for today, like I already mentioned, is how to navigate your life and career beyond MBA, right? Short, mid, and long-term career strategy. And how I would go through this agenda is focus on three main parts. Right? Firstly, why, though it would seem obvious, why it is important to have a solid career strategy for yourself. Um, and why it's extremely important, like I mentioned earlier as well, to remove a lot of clutter in your mind and a lot of advice and changes that keep on happening around you. Secondly, the what. Uh, when I say what, it's on what you should be focusing on and what you should not probably focus on as well, right? When you design your own career path. And third, and most importantly, which would be the meat of this discussion, is how you can navigate the different phases in your career. I like to make it very specific for you on what are the key areas that you should focus on at different phases. Firstly, on to the why. Um, as the great Benjamin Franklin said, and this would hold true for whatever you would do in life. It's not just with respect to career, right? By failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. So extremely important that you keep yourself prepared, you continue to prepare, and you ensure that you're prepared at all phases. Because if you are not prepared, then you are just leaving yourself to destiny, to fate's own hands. I agree, fate and destiny does also have it has its role to play, but at the end, you should be doing your best in terms of preparation so that you at least ensure from your end that you are having the right target and idea to follow so that you are succeeding not just in your career, like I mentioned, but in all facets of life. And going beyond on the why, right? Extremely important to remove a lot of clutter. And why the clutter? It's because, especially after you graduate from college, from MBA, you are greeted with a wide array of industries and roles. You would hear about your seniors succeeding in certain roles, certain firms, particular industry. For example, when I graduated back in 2015, e-commerce industry was at its helm. Right, firms like Uber, Snapdeal had just started off, even Ola, and then a lot of my peers actually wanted to go into it because that's where the money was. And that's the second point that I mentioned as well, the lure of CTC, because a lot of us, especially at the start of our career, is naturally, and I would understand, it is understandable as well as to why we are attracted towards CTC. And then there is always an aura of the in-demand skills. Like I mentioned, when I graduated, e-commerce was the main focus, and digital marketing, I remember, was something that a lot of people wanted to get into back then. It's still something that a lot of people pursue, and a lot of my peers have built successful careers around it as well. But it's a revolving door of sorts, right? As I speak, I think these days AI, Gen AI, data analytics, etc., is the norm of where in the most demand is. And then definitely, there is a lot of peer group pressure. You tend to look up to what your friends are trying to do, what your immediate seniors or someone in your family has done and succeeded. And then, last but not the least, especially in an Indian context, there's always a lot of advice, right? Solicited and unsolicited. So, family, friends, your friend, even your extended relatives who you may not have even seen in your life has an opinion on what you should do in your career, without realizing, what you as a person really want to do, right? So these are a lot of things that tend to play in our minds, not just whenever you immediately graduate, but at different phases. And more often than not, while all of these should be factored in, these shouldn't be the core decision making drivers at any point of time when you want to pursue a role or any industry in your particular career, right? So then what should you actually focus on? That's the next slide, right? When you choose a role, when you choose an industry, when you build your career, what really should you focus on? First and foremost, do a lot of introspection. Try to identify what really interests you and what do you love doing. There would be people who love working with numbers, crunching numbers, trying to do a lot of analysis, derive insights out of it. There would be people who are natural extroverts, right? Who want to, not just extroverts, but who enjoy building relationship, maintaining relationships, who enjoy talking to new people, uh, who really don't want a desk job of sorts, but want to go out there, explore a lot of opportunities. So it all depends on your interest on what you want to do, right? And that's where you should try and find roles which more or so fits in your interest on what you actually love doing. Uh, Not everyone is lucky to land up in such a role immediately after your career, after your college, but then no one is stopping you either in finding your right interest and something which suits your interest. Second and most important, while uh, it is imperative that you do what you love, it's also imperative to look at what you want to become, and what you want to do in the long term, and what you do want to achieve in the long term, right? What do you aspire to become? Do you see yourself as someone who heads the marketing team in a CPG industry? Do you see someone who is going to be an investment fund manager? Do you see someone who wants to build a career in sales? Right. So, what do you really aspire to become? That's something that you need to ask yourself. Third, this is something that a lot of us don't really focus on, especially at the start of our career, but also acknowledge that you have your own lifestyle requirements. Right? Some of us would love to travel. So then your job also needs to fit in that requirement. You should be able to travel. Some of us, want to have sufficient time to focus on health or some other passion outside work, some hobby of yours. So, probably a high demanding role like being in consulting or investment banking may not be your calling, and it's not, and it's fine to be so, as long as you acknowledge what you want to do and what sort of lifestyle do you want to maintain. Choose your roles and career accordingly. Uh, Growth, I think it's always important, and no one would like to be stagnant in their career, and you shouldn't be, right? Especially if you're someone who has done your MBA, and that too from a premier B school. You should always be on the lookout for what helps you grow in your career, not just in your career, but in your life as well. And how do you do that? by pursuing challenges, which helps you get out of your comfort zone. Right. So while you should keep your interest in mind, you should understand your aspirations. You have to have a fair understanding of your life. Keep challenging yourself. Keep challenging yourself to get out of your comfort zone, and that's where you acquire new skills. And you would end up realizing few things that you may not have known about yourself in that journey. And last but not the least, do ensure that you can keep consistency in your career and your life, right? So what you are doing as part of your career should be something that you should be able to do consistently all throughout. There shouldn't be a point where you feel that you are just going through the motions. You are just ending up doing work because it's your work, because that wouldn't take you far. And that's where at some points tough decisions may be needed, because if you feel that something that you're doing right now might interest you currently, but it's not something that you can do consistently, it's extremely important to have that realization and make a choice accordingly, right? So that's the what, and I feel these are I mean, I may be right, may not be. There would be a lot of other factors, but from my experience and from the mistakes that I've made as well, like I said earlier, these are the top 5 factors that you should keep in mind when identifying for yourself on what you need to do for your career, and keep aside all the clutter and different things that keep going around, um, to ensure that you end up doing something which is sustainable for yourself and something which you really love doing, right? Because at the end of the day, you spend 8 to 10 hours of your daily life at whatever you do as part of your career. So this is extremely important. Now, coming to the meat of what I really want to discuss as part of the session on how to navigate your career journey across 3 phases, the way I would look at it: short term, medium, and long term. I would define short term as the career phase immediately post your MBA, the first 5 years where you're trying to identify your fit, right? So that's the objective that I would keep for any one of you, that you should try and identify your fit within whatever industry or function that you're part of within the first 5 years of your MBA. And this is the phase where I would typically advise people to explore, and not being afraid to fail, because especially this is the phase where there's not a lot of responsibility outside your work life for most of us, and that's where you should be able to uh, try and fail, I would say, so that you realize where your strengths lie, and try and explore different opportunities in front of you. It's well and good if you land, if you're completely clear on what you want, right when you get out of college and you land in your dream role. uh, Best of luck. But if it's not, I don't think there's any reason to get demotivated, because this is the phase in which, uh, especially in India, there are a lot of roles and opportunities available to people who are graduating immediately from college, and this is a phase where you should explore and identify your fit. So that's the most important word, or the key word, that I'm looking for in the short term. Your fit needs to be identified. When it comes to your medium term career planning, which is 5 to 10 years post MBA, this is where you start designing your path, right? Till now, it is identifying where you want to fit in. Now you start designing your path, right? So what would you do? You need to really identify your calling. You would have, like I said, you would have explored quite a bit. You would have failed. You would have learned, unlearned, relearned a lot of things. And then at the end of it, this is the phase where one should aim to really identify your calling and start building your brand. In the market or even within the firm that you work in, it is extremely important to have your own brand, right? You should be identified as someone who can, let's say, someone who can, it could be very simple, right? Someone who can build slides very fast, someone who can do a lot of analysis on Excel, and come up with impressive visualizations on Power BI. It could be someone who is really comfortable talking to a new customer, bringing in sales, right? So that's the way people would identify you, because in the initial first few years you might be identified as someone from an IIM, with a postgraduate degree. But how people would identify you during the medium term phase is, uh, what sort of brand are you coming up with in terms of your work, right? What makes you different? What can you be relied upon? And that's extremely important to work on your brand, which in turn helps in designing your own path. And then coming to long term, which is 10 plus years post MBA, I would say I am more or less in this phase now, where one should build on your expertise. So once you've identified your fit, you have started designing your path, you have building your brand. This is the phase where you really need to double down and work on your width and width and depth of your expertise, right? You could be someone who could be, I mean, you should be known as a sales ninja by now, or someone who can solve the most difficult problems, analytics problems, someone who can identify what is happening with respect to your CPG operations and what sort of process improvement can be brought in, right? So you develop an expertise or niche for yourself by now, and you're seen as someone who can guide people who are in this phase, in the medium term phase of building their own brand. And at this phase, it is not about how many hours you put in, or how much effort you put in. You are solely measured based on the impact that you bring in. You would be more or less in a very senior position by this phase, post your MBA, and then all your success is measured basis the impact that you bring in at your job. So now, having set this context on the three different phases, what it means and what should be the objective across each these phases, I will now drill deeper into each of these phases and try and see how you can design your short term, medium term, and long term strategies. Firstly, focusing on short term strategy, there are three key questions I would say you should be asking yourself. Which industry do you want to be part of? For example, like I said, when I graduated out of college, a lot of people were very sure that they wanted to end up in e-commerce. They were not sure what type of role do they want to play, but pretty clear that they want to end up in e-commerce. Few of them wanted to end up in BFSI for sure. Some were very clear they wanted a life in consulting. So that's the first question that you should ask yourself, and it's fine if you don't have answers to all of these questions, right? But the key questions that you should be asking is firstly industry, like I mentioned. Second, which business function do you want to be part of? I may or may not know that which industry I want to be part of, but I would know that, okay, I would definitely want to be part of finance, or I want to be part of sales and marketing, or I want to be a human resources professional. That's also another good question that you could be asking yourself. And last but not the least, also, if you are really interested in expanding your skill set or developing your skill set in one particular area, like I said, digital marketing or analytics or data science, or if you want to be someone who is an expert in project management, you could identify that also as an area that you want to focus on. I've had probably two or three of my classmates who had an answer to all of these three questions. And that's where, I have pointed out this area in the middle that I would say God level clarity, because I would assure you not many people would have an answer to all three of these questions, at least in the initial phase of your career. But highly recommended if you can have an answer at least to two out of the three, so that you know probably which industry and function that you land up in, or which industry that you want to land up in, and what particular skill set do you want to focus on, or vice versa, right? So these are the three questions that you should be asking yourself. And like I said, if you have an answer to two out of these, great. It's a great start to your career, and you are already on the path to identifying your fit. And it's fine if you don't have an answer to any of these questions, or even if you have an answer only to one of these questions. But the intent should be that in your first phase, post MBA, which is your short term, first 5 years, you should try and achieve your fit by at least identifying two out of these three circles. Where do you fit in, right? And irrespective of where you fit in and what you end up doing, some desirable skills that you should surely develop and is expected from someone who has graduated from a top tier B school and have done MBA is structured thinking, the ability to think through complex problems in a very structured fashion, and the ability to explain it and storyboard it as well, right? So that's the third skill set that I've developed here. You should not just be able to think through problems and think about solutions in a very structured fashion, but you should be able to explain it to your audience as well, be it people in your firm or clients, external stakeholders, etc. And us being MBAs, us having cracked CAT and working through numbers, I think data analysis, especially in this day and age, is a mandatory skill set. A lot of your structured thinking and storyboarding will in turn be through data analysis that you do. So, being comfortable with Excel, being comfortable with visualization tools is the norm, whichever industry or function that you're part of. And last but not the least, the ability to manage multiple stakeholders, right? That's the key differentiator that all of us bring in as an MBA from a top tier B school. We end up not being very narrow minded. We end up looking at the bigger picture and also being able to work with people with diverse backgrounds across functions, what you call as cross functional collaboration. That's extremely important, and that's where you would need to manage multiple stakeholders. So this is also a desirable skill that you would need to develop, I would say, in your first 5 years of your career. Now, having uh, gone through your first phase successfully, um, gone through your first 5 years, you come into your midterm of your career, which is the 5 to 10 year phase post MBA, where, like I said, if you remember the keywords, after identifying the fit, it's about designing your path. Now, how would you design your path, right? I've myself been through a journey in my career. I've seen a lot of my peers, seniors, juniors, having navigated different types of careers post my MBA. But if I slice and dice through all of that, right, I've seen that more or less there are 3 to 4 paths that you can design for yourself um, during this phase, so that you are in a good position when you come to your long-term phase. So the three main paths that I've seen people pursuing is one, that of a functional expert, people who are in the same function but have worked across different industries. Even I've seen people excelling in sales, started off their career in CPG, B2C sales, then moved to B2B, have moved on to BFSI, have moved on to e-commerce, but necessarily understanding what are the core KRAs and KPIs associated with that function, right? Not just sales, could be operations, could be strategy, etc. But during this phase, you build your journey towards becoming a functional expert. That is one path that you can design for yourself. A second path that you could design is being an industry expert. Uh, and how you do this is by gaining first-hand experience of different functions within the same industry. So it could be being part of retail or CPG industry, and then exploring different functions within the industry, being part of finance function, being part of operations, being part of manufacturing in itself, and it's all different, right? The KPIs, KRIs, there are all different, but what it would help you is to understand how all of these functions collaborate together to make that firm move forward, to identify the key cost and revenue drivers, and understand how do you ensure in working through those cost and revenue drivers. So that makes you an industry expert. I do have peers, friends who have been in the BFSI industry, specifically, let's say, insurance industry, all throughout post MBA, but they have played different roles within the industry, right? So now at this phase of their career, they are known as an insurance expert, and people look up to them when they join that particular industry on what they need to do to navigate that industry better. So that's another path that you could take for yourself. The third path, I think that's where I fit in, to be very honest, is that of a generalist. So this is where you are someone who wants to not stick on to a particular function or industry, but explore more, and more or less end up as being identified as someone who is a jack of all trades. But the advantage that you get is that you are someone who can solve problems on the go, right? Because more or less what happens is you would have got such diverse experience and exposure across industries and functions. You embrace ambiguity. You start embracing ambiguity. You start looking at uh, the same problem from different lenses, and you start trying to solve problems in a way that it doesn't impact a lot of different stakeholders. And such people, mostly end up being in consulting because of the breadth of exposure that they would have got, or in startup firms, typically growth hacker roles or process optimization roles because of the wide lens that they look at uh, typical problems through. Also, outside of all these, like I said, there are four paths. While these three are the most common paths, there is a niche segment. I've seen people developing their careers as subject matter experts, would be industry functionally agnostic, but gain expertise on a particular subject matter. Of late, a lot of people have started becoming Gen AI experts, AI experts. Like I said, there were people who built their career in digital marketing, have focused solely on those skills, and this would be a result, like I've mentioned here, in terms of highly specializing on a particular skill set, not focusing on a particular function industry. You could remain agnostic across functions industry, but really focusing or delving deep into a particular skill set. That's a very niche segment. It has its own pros and cons. If you really, you know, uh, do exceptionally well, you are highly in demand. But also, one of the cons is that you end up being in a very niche career segment, right? It may be at times difficult to navigate that career path, but as long as that is where your passion lies, you should be doing fine as well. Irrespective of whichever path you end up taking, few of the desirable skills I would highly recommend people in this phase to develop is team management. Whatever role you are in, you would more or less end up managing teams in this phase of your career. So extremely important on how to get the best out of each team member. It may not be you doing the job. By now, it will be you making or ensuring people do the job for you. Um, and then while I stressed upon data analysis in the short term, at this phase, you start making decisions. And it's imperative that you base a lot of your decisions on data, especially in this day and age where there's a lot of data available. There are tools available to analyze data as well. It would be foolhardy to not base your decisions on data. People at this phase of their career would also start managing their own P&L, looking at, like I said, what drives revenue, what drives cost, how would you keep a healthy P&L? And then that's where a lot of our finance learnings from MBA help us. And last but not the least, client management. You might be in captive firms, you may not be in client facing functions, but at the end of the day, there would be some client in, be it in a B2C industry or B2B industry. You are eventually working for a client, right? So understanding the pain points of the client, understanding what they want is extremely important in whatever role you are. Even if you are being a product manager, I think it's extremely important to know what the consumer or end client is expecting from your product, and that intelligence is needed while designing the product, right? So even for such roles, being client focused, managing the client is something that you need to have a skill as during this phase of your career. Having navigated your short and long term of your mid term of your career, you come into the long-term phase, which is your 10 plus year phase, where I would say the focus should be on improving the width or depth of your expertise, right? So now, post your midterm, where you have designed a path for yourself, either you have been identified as a functional expert, industry expert, or a generalist, you will now need to either improve the width or depth of your expertise. So if you're a functional expert who has been in the same function but has worked across industries, your focus, like I've indicated here, should be to increase your width of expertise, try to have an understanding of other functions, know how other functions work with your own function. For example, if you have been in sales all throughout, at this point of your career, you should also understand what the finance team does, what operations does, what do they expect out of sales function, how do you collaborate with these functions. And it's extremely important, right? Because it is this phase where you are uh, really starting your journey towards being a CXO or being a partner when it comes to consulting firms, or being a VP director level position, right? So it's not just important to focus on the depth of your expertise, but also the breadth of your expertise. Now, if you have been an industry expert, and that is how you have designed your career, at this phase, you will also need to explore, other industries. You have been in the same industry, you've got a good understanding of different functions, but you also need to know other industries, because that's how you get to know what works in other industries versus what doesn't in yours, right? And you might be able to share best practices across industries. And this, it's extremely important to develop that wide lens, look at other industries and understand what to pick versus not, with your with all your experience till date being in a particular industry. Now, if you had taken the path of a generalist during your midterm, this is where it's extremely important, to be very honest, for someone, once you have entered your long-term phase, to continue as a generalist, right? While you have been a problem solver, this is the phase where you should try and develop some sort of specialization for yourself. It's completely okay to be agile, to be seen as someone who can work across functions, industries, but there should be something to anchor your career on, right? It could be about developing your expertise in a particular function, while being someone who can work across functions, or it could be about developing expertise in a particular industry. For example, if I had to talk about consulting, you could have been a consultant who could have worked across different industry problems, different functions. But at this phase, when you really want to move into a director, partner role, even within consulting, you need to be seen as an industry expert or a function expert. Let's say a CPG expert, BFSA expert, someone who can work on operations problems, someone who can work on sales problems, and can really guide people towards solving these problems, right? So this is how you will have to more so work on your depth more than width in the case of a generalist. Last but not the least, like I mentioned, there would be subject matter experts. Uh, you would have designed your career path as a subject matter expert during your midterm phase. And in the long term phase, from what I've seen from my experience, these are people who are more suited to move into advisory or research oriented roles. And such people actually, may not be working directly with clients, or may not be part of a lot of the decision making within the firm, but come up with novel products, novel ideas, new market decisions, etc., that a firm pursues. So that's a pretty interesting path by itself. Drilling down or doubling down on the subject matter experts path. But like I said earlier, it's a very niche path. Unless you're absolutely sure about what you want to pursue, and you're absolutely sure that's what you're passionate about, there's something that you will have to navigate with a lot of caution. Uh, Now, whichever path you choose, right, and whichever phase of in this phase of your career, some of the desirable skills that you need to develop for sure is conflict management. At this phase, it's a given that you would be resolving conflicts almost on a daily basis, be it internal, be it with the client, etc. And that's where your maturity, your experience comes into the picture. And someone like I mentioned earlier, at this phase, the core KRA or KPI on which you are measured on is your impact that you bring in, and hence it's extremely important to be goal oriented. You should be knowing what your organization is focusing on, what the goal of the organization is, and then you should be aligning your goal with the organization goal as well. And at this phase, it's I think it's imperative to have some sales acumen. You may not be in a sales function, or may not be in a client-facing role. You still might be in an internal role, but at the end of the day, it's all about business, right? So, uh, while you might be focusing on frugality, which is a fourth point, like I mentioned, and optimizing cost, it's also important to contribute to the top line at this phase of your career. So that's why sales acumen is a desirable and I would say mandatory skill to develop by this phase. So, in a nutshell, I think that's what I wanted to cover in terms of short, mid, and long-term strategy, how you could navigate these phases. This slide was more of an afterthought, and that's why you would see it's not really well formatted. But I did want to reiterate these points because, irrespective of whichever phase of your career you are in or whatever you're navigating, I think it's extremely important in this day and age to have these in your focus. Firstly, a lot of learning in any job is on the go, right? You'd end up picking up skills while you solve problems, while you're in a particular role. You end up learning something when you least expected it to. But at the same time, I think it's also important to formalize a lot of learnings. Formal learning, in my opinion, shouldn't be stopping after your graduation or post graduation. How you formalize learnings is by doing certifications. You could end up doing a double MBA if you really have the time for it. But uh, basis whichever function, industry, or skill set that you're focusing on, it's extremely important that you formalize your learning and pursue certifications like CBAP, PMP, Certified Scrum Master, etc. That keeps you focused, that keeps you goal oriented, that keeps you on track on the particular path that you're designing for yourself. Secondly, and very importantly, keep your curiosity levels up. Um, this is a time where you're seeing a lot of changes. Um, a lot of industries, a lot of careers are going through changes. And hence, it's important to keep your curiosity levels up. Important not to get into a comfort zone because before you even realize, a lot of roles are bound to change in the next few years, courtesy technology and data and AI, which is the hype at this point of time. And it's not just hype, right? It's a reality at this phase. So it's important to keep your curiosity levels up, understand what is happening out there. And something which is said very less, but it's extremely important that you be good with people. You might be the best when it comes to knowledge, when it comes to your skills, etc. But finally, when you're part of a firm, when you're working for a firm, when you're working with a team, people should like working with you. Um, you know, uh, that's where your attitude matters quite a bit. So be good with people, be it your stakeholders, juniors, peers, clients, whoever it is. So that goes without saying. And last but not the least, I think I would like to end this presentation by saying this: while all my talk has been about career, how you would design your career, please do understand that your career is only a small part of your life. You have your family, you have your health to take care of, you have your passions and hobbies to take care of. So, career is only one part of life that you should be planning for, and it should not be the other way around, with life being a part of your career, right? So, please do always look at life with a larger lens beyond your career while you definitely plan for it. That's it from me. Thank you. I'm open to take any questions, please.
So, firstly, thank you, Mr. Sachin, for such an insightful session. Your guidance on navigating career planning at every stage has truly motivated all of us. We'll open the floor to questions, as you just said. Thank you.
Yes, Ganeshwar.
Hi, sir.
I do see your raised hand.
Thank you
Hi.
so much for your, wonderful insights in your presentation. Recently we have went through our SIPs, and one of the and parallelly there was this news of this one employee who was really stressed out through her job in a very similar industry. So one thing that takes up a large space in our discussion is that industry like consulting or a strategy where you have to put in a lot of amount of time. There is big hustle. Of course, they pay you more. However, when you move
Right.
toward the mid level of your career, the marginal utility of the additional amount of money that you can earn decreases. So
Mm.
at that point of time, what is the primary motivation that keep one in this industry and keeps one going in the industry?
Right. Right. Sure. So great question, Gyaneshwar. And I think this is where one of the first slides that that I showed you, right? I think you should be asking yourself on what you really want to do, and that's not a question that you should be asking only at the start of your career, but at all phases of your career, right? If I have to take my example, I'm someone who have moved into consulting after 8 years of working across different firms, and I took this decision understanding that it's probably more demanding compared to a lot of other roles that I've done, but also with the understanding that I'm more mature as a person. I can take trust better than what I used to before, and I can deal with ambiguity better than what I used to before, right? So I think it's extremely important to understand where your strengths and weakness both lie at different phases of your career, and uh, you should be open to acknowledging that these keeps changing with experience as well. There has been peers of mine who started off with consulting, did really well in their job, but at some point realized that they needed a lot of time outside work as well, right? And that's something which is not possible their current role. So they took the decision to move out of consulting. They even took a pay cut, as far as I know, but doing something that they're happy about now, and happy with their overall life. So, like I said, I think it's important to keep aside a lot of clutter about CTC, about what the glamorous roles are, etc. Truly understand what you want to do and pursue it with full conviction. I think that's the most important. I hope I answered your question, Gary.
Yeah, surely. Thank you so much for your guidance. It really, brought in clarity.
Sure. Thank you.
So there's one more question in the chat box. I don't know if you are able to see it. So
Yeah.
the question is from Arshi. What are the realistic goals to keep in regards to short and long-term careers, like for personally?
Sure. So I think for short term, um, a realistic goal should be to identify your fit in terms of any industry or function that you want to be part of, right? So if I have to take my own career journey as an example, I was someone, at least at the start of my career, who was very clear that I wanted to get into operations or operations consulting or strategy related roles, but ended up being into an IT business analyst role, which honestly was not something that I wished to pursue at that point. But what I also did during that phase of my career was to work on transferable skills, the way they call it, right? So, your ability to deal with clients, your ability to look at process, your ability to look at how you can improve process, how you look at data, how you can make decisions based on data are largely transferable skill sets, and this really helped me to move into an operations role within 2 years, right? So while I had that clarity, I didn't end up in that particular function that I wanted to end up in, and even beyond that, I didn't end up probably in the industry that I wanted to end up in. I wanted to end up in an e-commerce industry to start off my career, but I was in IT and financial services industry for a long phase, for almost 5 to 6 years, and it was in my seventh or eighth year post my career where I ended up in e-commerce as well. So I would say a realistic expectation to keep for yourself is to acknowledge the fact that you may not have 100% fit, at least in the start of your career, but at least you should be able to navigate and willing to explore to at least find that one fit either in terms of industry, skill set, or function that you want to pursue. And then in your long term, like I said, it's about expanding on your width or breadth of what you want to focus on, right? Once you have explored a particular function, try to explore other functions. Once you're explored an industry, try to explore other industries. And that's how you're built, you really prepare yourself for senior leadership positions. If your focus is on CTC or, glamorous roles alone, it might be great to start off with, but it may not really help you keep the motivation levels up for the long term. So I would feel fit and having the path designed for yourself is what is key.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was a great session. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arnav. Thank you, everyone. Bye.